They will tell you family is everything, that blood is thicker than betrayal, that love can excuse humiliation, that duty can justify silence. But Machiavelli would disagree. He knew the truth most people cannot face. The first place you are manipulated is not the palace or the battlefield, it is the living room. And sometimes survival means learning how to play the game colder than those who raised you. This is not about healing, this is about escape. And it begins by seeing your family for what they really are. A system built to control you. The most dangerous form of manipulation is the one wrapped in memory. In a narcissistic family, love is never given freely, it is weaponized. Approval becomes currency. Silence becomes survival. You are not raised, you are trained. Every meal, every smile, every story, retold at holidays, is not tradition. It's control, rehearsed through repetition. And when you try to breathe outside the script, they call you the ungrateful one. Machiavelli would see it clearly. You are being governed. Not by laws, but by guilt. Not by rules, but by roles assigned to you before you could even speak. The golden child is polished to shine for the family's image. The scapegoat is sacrificed to protect it. And the invisible one is forgotten until they are useful again. These aren't just emotional wounds. These are tactical positions set by those who use love like a leash. You cannot escape what you do not name. So here is the first rule. Stop calling it love when it's really leverage. Family, to the outside world, is sacred. But behind closed doors, it is often a closed system, one that feeds on obedience and punishes clarity. Every time you question the narrative, they do not hear your pain, they hear treason. Every time you try to speak truth, they label it drama. But that is not a flaw in the system. That is the design. You were never meant to rise. You were meant to remain orbiting their needs. But the moment you see it, you stop being the subject. You become the strategist. And from that moment, everything shifts. You no longer beg for kindness. They use it to reset the cycle. You no longer argue for fairness. It's never been about fairness. It's about control. You study their patterns not to please, but to predict. You listen not to obey, but to prepare. And most of all, you stop expecting them to change. Because survival begins not when they apologize, but when you stop needing them to. That is the battlefield. And from here, your war becomes quiet, strategic, and cold. Exactly how it must be. A narcissist alone is harmless. It is only when they gather an audience that the real damage begins. Because the narcissist's power does not come from truth, it comes from perception, from controlling the narrative, warping the lens through which others see you, and turning family into theatre. You are not a person in this story. You are a character, a role designed to set them up for applause. This is Machiavellian at its core. They stage conflict not to resolve it, but to be seen winning it. They will start the fire and play the hero when they put it out. They provoke you until you react, then call your reaction the crime. In public, they speak in honeyed tones, praising you just enough to seem supportive. In private, they chip away at your sanity until you question what's real. And the others, the enablers, the flying monkeys, are not passive bystanders. They are the audience the narcissist needs to stay powerful. Without witnesses, their manipulations have no teeth. But with the right stage, they weaponize attention. The family group chat, the dinner table, the church pew, the social media post with selective gratitude. All of it becomes performance. You may think speaking the truth will clear your name. That logic will untangle the lies. But in a narcissistic system, truth is irrelevant. Optics are everything. And that is why you must learn to move differently. You do not explain. You document. You do not argue. You observe. You do not react. You plan. Let them have their audience for now. Because power built on performance always collapses under time. The more they need to be seen as good, the more they fear being seen as false. That fear is your leverage. The day you stop playing your role is the day the script falls apart. And when their version of reality no longer holds, the audience begins to look closer. That is when the narcissist begins to sweat. They will escalate. They will lash out. They will accuse you of changing, of being cruel, of abandoning them. But it is not abandonment. It is escape, because you were never free to begin with. Understand this. Narcissists don't want connection. They want control. And they don't want love. They want loyalty without question. Once you remove their audience, you remove their power. This is not cruelty. It is strategy. The performance ends when you stop applauding. That is how you win. Quietly, completely, without needing to be seen. The most dangerous part of a narcissistic family is not what they say to you, it's the story they say about you. A story that was written long before you ever got to speak. And the trap is this: the more you try to correct it, the more real it becomes. Because in narcissistic systems, arguing is not dialogue. It's proof. Proof that you are too emotional, too difficult, too sensitive, too much. The moment you try to defend yourself, you become the very thing they claim you are. This is not a misunderstanding. This is by design. Narcissistic families survive through unspoken scripts. One child is the scapegoat. Another, the golden child. One parent is always tired from doing everything, while the other disappears into selective silence. And you, if you're reading this, were likely cast as the unstable one, the ungrateful one, the one who always starts the drama. So when you push back, you validate the script. Machiavelli would warn you, never fight a battle on the enemy's field. Do not argue with the narrative. Instead, starve it. Do not explain what they did wrong. Record it. Do not plead to be understood. Let silence haunt them instead. The power of the narrative is its ability to bait you into correcting it. But once you stop, something strange happens. They talk louder. They provoke harder. They reach for more dramatic accusations. Why? Because you're no longer playing your part. Narcissists do not seek truth. They seek reaction. Your refusal to give them one becomes the most powerful disruption. When you no longer try to be seen as good, they lose their weapon. They can say you're a monster, but monsters don't stay quiet and composed. They can claim you've abandoned the family, but families built on fear are not homes. Let the story unfold without you. Let the group chat buzz. Let the relatives whisper. Let them accuse. Your silence is not submission, it's strategy. It signals to the observant that something is off, that maybe you're not the problem, that maybe the truth they've always heard doesn't add up. And that crack in perception is the beginning of their collapse. You do not win by arguing louder. You win by refusing to audition for a role you never chose. Once you stop performing, the script dies in your absence. And when the story no longer holds, when their words begin to sound hollow, even to their most loyal audience, you become untouchable. Not because they never speak about you, but because nothing they say can shake you anymore. Emotional closeness is a weapon in a narcissistic household, not a comfort. The more you feel, the more they feed. The more you hope, the more they twist. And the moment you give them access to your emotional core, they begin reshaping it to match their own dysfunction. That's why the smartest survivors of narcissistic families are not the ones who shout or rebel loudly. It's the ones who go silent inside. Not numb, not cold, but detached in a way that starves the narcissist of the drama they crave. Emotional distance is not a lack of care. It's an act of control. When you stop reacting to every guilt trip, every backhanded compliment, every manufactured crisis, something incredible happens. They lose their grip. Narcissists are not built for silence. They are addicted to your emotional response because that response gives them proof that they still matter more than you. When you cry, they feel powerful. When you argue, they feel superior. But when you say nothing, when your face reveals nothing, when your presence becomes steady and unreadable, they feel the panic they once fed you. You're no longer their mirror. You've become a wall, one they can't climb or crack. Strategic emotional distance is the quiet rebellion that flips the entire system upside down. It means you stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing approval. You stop expecting them to see your side, feel your pain, or offer the apology that will never come. You stop offering your energy like a sacrifice at the altar of their ego. You learn to nod without agreeing, to listen without absorbing, to coexist without surrendering your peace. And over time, that distance begins to build a life they can't enter, a mind they can't read, a version of you they can no longer edit. Narcissistic families function like a script, and every role is written in emotional ink: scapegoat, golden child, lost one, fixer. But emotional distance erases the ink. It removes you from the drama without needing a confrontation. You don't have to prove anything. You don't even have to leave the room. You just stop reacting the way they expect. And that, in itself, is war, a quiet one. But one you win every time. You choose silence over engagement, calm over chaos, boundaries over guilt. Strategic emotional distance is not selfish. It's survival. And the more you practice it, the more you begin to see the truth. They were never as powerful as they made you feel. They just knew how to keep you close through confusion and control. But now you know better. Now you choose stillness. Now you choose detachment. And now they no longer get to choose your emotional state for you. That power is yours again. Keep it. Guard it. Use it. The most dangerous thing you can do in a narcissistic family is build a self they don't recognize. A version of you that lives outside the roles they assigned. Because narcissistic families survive on predictability, they need to know exactly which emotional buttons to press, which wounds still bleed, and what version of you still craves their approval. So they define you early. You're the helper, the rebel, the invisible one, the broken one, the overachiever. But what happens when you stop performing? When you start building a private identity, one they don't see, can't label, and no longer control? What happens is simple. The system begins to fracture. Private identity is not about hiding. It's about sovereignty. It's about developing opinions you don't share, friendships they don't monitor, goals that exist without their validation. It's about thinking without asking permission, feeling without seeking their reaction, living a life that doesn't require their applause to feel real. Because once they can no longer map your internal world, they lose their map to control you. Narcissistic parents and enmeshed siblings often rely on a version of you that never changed. But your silence, your refusal to explain who you're becoming, terrifies them. And it should, because it means you're no longer predictable. You're no longer accessible. You're no longer theirs. That's the power of private identity. It creates psychological distance they cannot cross. Not because you blocked them on every app or moved across the country, but because the core of you now exists in a space they can't enter. And even if they try, they're met with calm indifference, not open wounds. You've changed the terrain. The version of you they once played like a puppet has burned quietly, and in its place stands someone they can't quite read, someone unfamiliar. You do not need to announce this change. In fact, don't. Don't tell them who you're becoming. Don't justify why you no longer share your victories, your sadness, or your time. Let them feel the absence of control. Let them fill the silence with their own questions. Because a narcissist's worst fear is not your anger, it's your freedom. The moment you stop letting them define you is the moment they realize their reflection no longer exists in your mirror. They are left to face their own emptiness. Meanwhile, you are building something far more lasting than rebellion. You are building a private world, a private mind, and a private power they will never touch. And that is how you win, not by being louder, not by being ruder, not by confronting them with rage, but by becoming untouchable from the inside out. The trap in every narcissistic family is reaction. They don't need to hit you to control you, they just need to know where your nerves are. Every sigh, every raised brow, every silent glance is a test, and if you flinch, they've found the lever. That's why reaction is currency. The more you spend, the more they own. In a family built on manipulation, what you react to tells them what still hurts, what still matters, what still makes you small. But the moment you become selective, when you stop explaining, stop defending, stop rising to every jab, you break the cycle. They'll accuse you of being cold, of withdrawing, of being selfish or ungrateful. Good. That means it's working. Because emotional control is not indifference, it's power. When you control your reactions, you're no longer living in their theatre. You're no longer giving them the applause they expect or the outrage they need to feel important. You become a wall they cannot climb, a silence they cannot decode. Most narcissists are addicted to chaos, not just creating it, but watching how others collapse under it. But when you stand still, when your voice doesn't rise, when your breathing doesn't shift, you force them to confront something they cannot manipulate, your absence of performance. You've stepped out of the drama, and now they're screaming into a void. It infuriates them. Let it. Because you're teaching them a new law, your energy is not free. Your emotions are not a buffet for them to feast on. And your silence is no longer permission, it's a boundary. You don't owe your anger. You don't owe your pain. You owe yourself peace. Selective reaction means you no longer correct every lie they tell. You no longer defend yourself against twisted versions of your past. You no longer try to win a debate that was never meant to be fair. You sit with your power. You sit with your truth. And you let them expose themselves in the silence you provide. In the world of the narcissist, control is survival. They need to dominate the emotional tempo of every room. So when you take that tempo back, when you respond slowly or not at all, when your face gives nothing and your voice remains calm, you become untouchable. They'll lash harder at first, they always do. But eventually, they turn their chaos elsewhere, because chaos only feeds where it's fed. And you, now, have learned the art of starvation. Let them starve. Because in your restraint lies the one thing they will never understand. True strength is not reaction. It is choosing when, how, and if you respond at all. That's not silence. That's strategy. In narcissistic families, love is rarely love. It's performance, and every member has a role carved into them like stone. You were the golden child, the scapegoat, the lost one, the peacemaker, the emotional sponge. They didn't raise you, they cast you. You weren't nurtured, you were assigned. And from the moment you stepped into that role, every reaction you gave, every choice you made, every silence you swallowed, it was shaped by a script you never agreed to. But here's the truth. The role they gave you is not your identity. It's a prison designed to keep the narcissist in power. If you're the scapegoat, they stay blameless. If you're the golden child, they live vicariously through your image. If you're the peacekeeper, they never have to face conflict. You weren't chosen for these roles because of who you are. You were chosen for how you serve their story. And that story only works as long as you stay predictable. The moment you step out of character, when the scapegoat stops apologizing, when the golden child sets a boundary, when the lost one speaks up, you break the illusion. You become dangerous, uncontrollable. And for a narcissistic system, that's a threat. But it's also your first step to freedom. Breaking the role doesn't always mean confrontation. It means disobedience, quiet rebellion. It means responding in ways they don't expect. When they bait you, you don't react. When they triangulate, you don't participate. When they shame you, you don't internalize it. They call you selfish, you get quieter. They accuse you of betrayal, you get calmer. Because the moment they can no longer predict your reactions, their script falls apart. You create confusion, and in that confusion, you carve space for your real identity to emerge, one they can't control, shape, or label. At first, they'll push harder. They'll guilt, gaslight, and rage. Not because you're wrong, but because you've disrupted the ecosystem where their control thrives. But if you hold the line, if you stay in your new role, the one you chose, not the one they wrote, you'll notice something shift. The shame stops sticking. The fear stops guiding. The love starts feeling less like debt and more like a memory. And then one day, you look in the mirror and realize you're not a character anymore. You're the author. And the story they tried to write for you, it ends here. When you break the role, you break the spell. Not just for yourself, but for anyone watching, silently hoping someone would be brave enough to go first. Be that person. The most dangerous thing you can do in a narcissistic family is nothing. Not because you've surrendered, but because stillness breaks the performance. These families run on momentum, accusations flying, secrets whispered, roles enforced through chaos and confusion. Everyone is always reacting. Everyone is always trying to survive the moment. But when you stop reacting, when you go still, you become the mirror they can't escape. A narcissist thrives on noise. They bait, provoke, and manipulate because they need emotional proof that they matter. They need your outrage, your tears, your pleas. Every reaction from you is a reflection back to them, proof of their impact, evidence of control. But when you offer nothing, when their words meet silence, when their games meet indifference, they begin to crumble. Not because you fought harder, but because you've refused to play. Stillness isn't passive, it's surgical. It cuts deeper than argument ever could. It shifts the weight of the moment. Suddenly, they're the only one yelling, the only one spinning, the only one unraveling, and everyone can see it. The power of stillness is that it forces contrast. It reveals who is composed and who is performing. In a family built on emotional theatre, you become the quiet seat in the audience, and the show, under your gaze, begins to fall apart. When you are still, you see more. You notice the patterns they think are invisible. You watch the manipulation unfold without stepping into it. And in that awareness, you gain leverage. Stillness lets you choose your moment. It keeps you from reacting on their terms, and instead makes them wait on yours. It turns the chaos back on them. They don't know if you're planning something or if you've already escaped them in your mind. That uncertainty haunts them, because control is only possible when they know your next move. Stillness takes that away. And here's the truth they fear most. People watching from the outside, the extended family, the partners, the friends, they start to notice too. They start to wonder why the quiet one never explodes. Why the accusations never get a reaction. Why, in the middle of the storm, one person remains calm. It doesn't take long before they start asking the question that undoes the entire narcissistic structure. What if it's not you? That's how stillness exposes. Not with declarations, not with confrontation, but with quiet contrast, with emotional gravity, with presence. You don't need to scream your truth to be believed. Sometimes, the loudest revelation is the one whispered in silence. And sometimes, the greatest rebellion is the refusal to flinch. They won't let you leave loudly. Narcissistic families are built like fortresses, not to protect you, but to trap you. Walls made of guilt, locks made of loyalty. And every time you try to walk out, they pull the fire alarm. Drama, crisis, betrayal. So if you want to survive, you don't announce your escape. You vanish. Not all at once, not dramatically, just gradually. Silently, the invisible escape plan begins in the mind, long before it touches your feet. It starts when you stop expecting them to understand you, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop hoping for accountability, or fairness, or change. It starts the moment you realize they don't need to hear your side of the story, they just need to hear silence, because silence means they no longer own you. While they argue over who you used to be, you're already becoming someone else. Someone they don't know how to hurt. This plan is slow by design. You reduce contact without announcement. You start saying maybe instead of yes. You share less, you reveal less, and you begin building a life that functions without their input. It's not escape through confrontation. It's escape through replacement. You replace their version of you with one of your own making. You replace family events with solo rituals, guilt trips with grounded boundaries, their chaos with your peace. They'll feel the shift, but they won't understand it. That's the point. Because the moment they realize you're leaving, they'll try to sabotage it. They'll call you ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. They'll weaponize memory, rewrite history, bleed into your future with words designed to drag you back. That's why you never argue. You just keep moving. You make your world wider, slowly, until theirs no longer fits inside it. And one day, they'll call and you won't answer. Not out of rage, not out of bitterness, but because you're busy living a life that no longer includes them. You don't need closure from a family that fed off your confusion. You don't need to slam the door. They'll feel the cold draft when they reach for you and realize you're gone. This isn't the dramatic escape they trained you to play. This is the quiet version, the one they never see coming, the one where you don't scream, "I'm free," you just are, and the silence you leave behind will be louder than any explanation ever could be. They want you to explain, to defend, to justify why you changed, why you pulled away, why you no longer play the role they gave you. They'll ask with smiles that feel like traps, with accusations wrapped in concern. Why are you being so distant? What happened to the old you? But here's the truth. The moment you start explaining, you step back into their frame. You hand them the pen to write your story again, and they will never write you as strong, never as sovereign, only as confused, over-emotional, selfish. That's why you do not explain. You shift, quietly, strategically, with no apology. Machiavelli understood this. Power does not justify itself. It simply moves. Kings do not explain why they walk away from the table. They just leave the room, and the room adjusts. You must do the same. When they push for answers, let silence do the speaking. When they beg for context, give them none. Let them fill in the blanks with their own projections, and they will. They will imagine everything from betrayal to brainwashing because they can't accept a version of you that isn't centered around them. But let them spiral. The more they guess, the less they control. You don't escape by convincing them. You escape by becoming unexplainable, emotionally unreadable, tactically unpredictable, a person whose life is no longer lived in reaction to theirs. You shift the conversation by refusing to have it. You shift the narrative by refusing to correct it. And with each refusal, your control grows. They say silence is avoidance, but in power, silence is strategy. The less they know about your motives, the less they can weaponize them. When you act, do it cleanly. No preface, no follow-up. If you stop showing up, don't explain why. If you set a boundary, don't give a speech. Just let the new rules be felt, not debated. Let them realize too late that the version of you they once knew is gone. Not in flames, not in fury, but in a shift so deliberate it cannot be undone. Remember, people don't respect what they understand. They respect what they cannot touch. So let them reach. Let them search for cracks in your silence, for clues in your calm. Let them waste their energy trying to decode your stillness while you move further away. You don't owe them your reasons. You owe yourself your freedom. The biggest lie they told you was that loyalty begins and ends with blood. That family is everything. That no matter what happens, what they say, what they do, you must stay. That walking away is betrayal. But what they really mean is this: loyalty means submission. And the moment you question it, you become the villain in their story. In narcissistic families, love is currency, given when you behave, withdrawn when you rebel. They taught you to believe that approval was survival and that belonging required obedience. But survival doesn't mean staying, it means adapting, choosing, and eventually replacing the system that once held you hostage. Machiavelli understood that real power requires allies, not inherited ones, but chosen ones. People who see you as you are, not as they need you to be. Friends who don't monitor your growth with suspicion. Mentors who don't diminish your wins to keep you small. Lovers who aren't threatened by your independence. These are your new roots, and you must build them quietly, deliberately, because the narcissistic family will notice when your attention shifts, when the emotional leash no longer pulls you back, and they will retaliate with guilt, with stories, with sudden bursts of fake affection. Don't fall for it. The escape begins not with distance, but with loyalty reallocated. Every time you give time, energy, or trust to someone outside the old system, you weaken its grip. Every moment spent with people who value your silence, your no, your freedom builds a new map of selfhood. This is not betrayal. This is reprogramming. Because loyalty is not an inherited debt, it's a chosen investment. And you are allowed to change where you invest. You are allowed to outgrow the place that raised you. And you are allowed to never look back. The bloodline will tell you no one else will love you like they do. That you're ungrateful. That outsiders can never understand you the way they do. But here's the secret. Outsiders don't need to understand your past to love your present. They just need to respect your boundaries. And if someone does that, they are already more of a family than those who never did. Loyalty is sacred, but it is not owed to those who abused it. The world is wider than the house you were raised in. And sometimes, salvation begins with one person who reminds you that love doesn't have to hurt. Build your army, slowly, quietly. Then walk away from the battlefield you were born into, because you don't need to win their game. You need to stop playing it. In a narcissistic family, predictability is not safety, it's control. They study you, memorize your reactions, track your routines, so they can press the same emotional buttons again and again, knowing exactly what you'll do, how you'll feel, what words will shake you. They don't need to overpower you physically. They just need to stay one step ahead of your emotions. That's why becoming unreadable is the most dangerous rebellion. Machiavelli knew this well. The more unpredictable you are, the less vulnerable you become. When people can't predict you, they fear you. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've taken away their weapon, certainty. Narcissists rely on emotional blueprints. If they mock you and you always explain, then your explanation becomes the leash. If they shame you and you always cry, then your pain becomes their power. But what happens when you stop following the script? What happens when their jab gets no reaction, their story gets no response, their manipulation meets only silence? You don't have to be loud to be dangerous. You have to be unreadable. Start small. Change the rhythm. Don't answer the phone right away. Don't explain every shift in mood. Let your eyes be calm but distant. Let your posture speak confidence even when you say nothing. Let your smile linger when it shouldn't. Let your silence stretch longer than they expect. This isn't cruelty, it's self-defense. It's the disruption of their illusion that they own you. And once you become unreadable, something strange happens. They begin to unravel, not because you attacked, but because they can no longer find the seams. They don't know what version of you they'll get. They don't know if you'll respond, ignore, or simply disappear. That uncertainty is your power. It breaks the cycle. It burns the script. It forces them to speak without knowing how you'll answer, and that makes them weak. Do not give them access to your internal map. Let them guess. Let them spiral. Because the goal is not to be understood by those who misunderstood you on purpose. The goal is to reclaim the mystery they stole from you. To become the kind of person they can't narrate anymore. The unreadable one doesn't react. They observe. They choose when to appear and when to vanish. When to smile and when to sever ties. They hold their truth close and offer it rarely. Not out of fear, but out of strategy. You are no longer theirs to define. You are not the role they wrote for you. You are not the character who breaks down on cue. You are the blank page now. And in a house that thrived on your predictability, your silence, your strangeness is your final act of control. Let them wonder who you've become, because wondering is what keeps them powerless. You do not need to explain why you left a burning building. You do not need to write a farewell letter to a storm. Narcissistic families will try to make your exit the crime, not the years of silence, shame, and manipulation that led to it. But you owe no apology for saving your own life. This is the final rule, Machiavelli would have whispered. Power is not declared, it is taken, and sometimes that means walking away without a backward glance. The guilt they'll try to plant in you is just another leash. The demand for closure, a trap. They don't want to understand your pain. They want to reopen it, reframe it, pull you back into the script where you're the broken one, the ungrateful one, the villain for choosing distance over dysfunction. And if you go back to explain, they will only weaponize your words. So don't. Leave in silence. Leave with clarity. Leave like someone who has nothing left to prove. Because survival is not betrayal. Healing is not disrespect. It is rebellion against the version of love that required your erasure. You were taught that love meant shrinking yourself, absorbing blame, tolerating cruelty as family tradition. But Machiavellian wisdom teaches the opposite, that power lies in self-preservation, in walking the knife's edge between memory and freedom. Your family may never admit what they did. They may rewrite history, cast you as the problem, mourn the version of you they controlled, but that's not your concern anymore. Your concern is the future that begins the moment you stop explaining your past. Some escapes are loud, yours doesn't need to be. It can be a quiet severing, a number blocked, a room you never return to, a story you no longer feel obligated to correct. Let them call you cold. Let them say you changed, because you did. You learned to prioritize peace over performance, truth over loyalty to a lie. You learned that love should not demand your silence, your identity, your suffering. And if that makes you the villain in their story, so be it. You are not theirs to narrate. You are not a chapter in someone else's delusion. You are your own author now. And the final page of their influence ends with your quiet exit. No apology, no justification, just freedom. Like this video, subscribe to Dark Blue Psychology, turn on notifications, and remember, silence is strategy, survival is power. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away without a single word.